I'm Caleb Kidd Coy, Epic Legacy Hero Builder, and I'd like to welcome you to Living Like a Bank. Along with myself, you'll hear from other successful experts and people who are busy serving and empowering many lives. You'll see how we're showing others to become debt-free in record time as they build economic discipline while generating a bulletproof family legacy revenue stream together. We'll learn how to live and operate just like the banks do. Hey all, Caleb Kidd Coy back at you, your alchemized slayer of mediocrity, heroic family legacy builder, and host of Living Like a Bank podcast. We're back in action with the Business Book Club, and we are discussing Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. And law number 3, conceal your intention. And the lovely, handsome, astonishing Christian McFarland joining me back in the studio today. Chris, what's up, dude?
We are, man. We're rocking and rolling, busting out some podcasts. So having fun.
I love it. So we just covered a bit of a controversial law, didn't we? And Robert Greene's number 2 there, never put too much trust in friends. So if you guys didn't get a chance to watch or listen to that, we do encourage you to go back and check that out. Law number 3 is interesting as well.
Caleb, before we get into 3, and make your rivals put your rivals to work.
Put your rivals to work. There you go. We substituted the term that Robert used as enemies for rivals because we felt it was much more of a modern fitting. But there it was, number 2, never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use your rivals. And on to law number 3. Let's talk about judgment and law number 3. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. If they have no clue what you're up to, they cannot prepare a defense. Guide them far enough down the wrong path, envelop them in enough smoke, and by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late. Chris, how do you feel about that?
That sounds shady as heck, doesn't
it? Sounds a bit smoky.
Smoky. No, but really, if we think about it, it's kind of obvious. It's pretty basic. I mean, anybody who's ever played any kind of sports understands a juke or a head fake, right? You set them up with the forehand before you whip the cross court, you know. If you play various games like chess, I play a lot of chess. Even people who don't play chess have probably heard of the Queen's Gambit, which is simply where you do the most obvious basic thing. You move up to the middle of the board, your opponent moves up to the middle of the board, and then you appear to make a mistake and give away a piece. And if they take that, a good player can then take advantage of that by that gambit. And so that's just a basic example of you're showing one thing, but you're really doing something else. In any type of competitive situation, it's kind of an obvious point, isn't it?
It is. So make it look like I'm about ready to crush a topspin forehand and then, land the drop shot.
Boom! Oh, God.
Kind of where you're going. Yeah,
exactly.
And it's, in this competitive world that we live in, business as well. Again, we talked about rivals in the last law. You and I, right, in our associations in the financial arena and the insurance arena, there's a lot of competition. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people jockeying for position. Now, I know our approach maybe a little bit different than most, that we're more led to serve and empower people. Again, it's more important that we help people be better, do better than make a sale at the end of the day. And we hope there's a lot of people out there that relate with that too, because I think in the long run, you're going to get further. But again, you've always got people watching you, wanting to imitate and mimic you, which they say imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So that's okay. But if you want to maintain your edge, this is a pretty neat applicable law, wouldn't you say?
It's like, even you can apply this one on basic levels, even like in a family, or it's not just business and it's not just high-end stuff. Like if you make it too obvious what you're trying to do, like, for example, you're a parent, right? So you could probably give a better example than me, but your fundamental goal is to make your kids grow up healthy, right? Mm-hmm. And so maybe one way that there's a lot of things you could do to do that, but maybe, one of the things is to get them to eat more broccoli or more lettuce or something like that. And so when we talk about conceal your intentions, like I don't know. Greene is really good at making things sound edgy and provocative.
Mhm.
but it's just like putting some salad dressing on the lettuce.
Mm.
It's like putting the broccoli in cheese sauce, right? When we say conceal your intentions, it's just like make it more palatable is another way of saying that, isn't it?
Right, right.
Here, kid, eat this raw broccoli, or I'm going to cook it for you and I'm going to put it in some cheese sauce, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's on a basic level concealing your intentions, right?
It is. It is. And you did nail it. I think Robert's approach in this book is provocative, but I do like it because, you know, how many of these real life examples has Netflix or somebody created into some type of series or movies? And this is just a reality of human nature. All right, let's read this paragraph here. If you yearn for power, quickly lay honesty aside. And train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions. Again, we're neither advocating nor,
Caleb, I don't think he's saying to not be. I think
he's not. But let me finish it. Then I want to hear your thought on that. Train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions. Master the art, and you will always have the upper hand. Basic to an ability to conceal one's intentions is a simple truth about human nature. Our first instinct is to always trust appearances. Go ahead.
Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to. So let's go back to Lincoln, because we were talking in the last pod about Lincoln. Lincoln was just as ambitious as any of those other guys, and privately, he did think he had a shot. He had done, and as long as Seward didn't get it on the first ballot, everybody thought Seward was the most likely. And Seward famously went off to Europe for 8 months and didn't campaign. Didn't work hard, but he had been honest about what he wanted, quote, honest. And let's, again, I'm going to substitute a different phrase that's maybe a little less provocative. Instead of being honest, let's just say straightforward.
Straightforward.
Sometimes it's not the best to be straightforward. For example, when we were young men before we became married, if you wanted to meet an attractive young lady, probably the best thing isn't to do, like, if you've never talked to her before and the first words out of your mouth are, I love you, I want to spend the rest of my life with you.
Oh, it's not, hey, baby.
Hey, baby, what's up? Oh, boy, Alexa is...
Alexa responded.
Alexa responded to me there.
That was pretty funny.
But, I mean, the straightforward play isn't always the best thing, right? Like we might be like, all love eyes, like, wow, I just saw the most amazing woman I've ever seen, or a woman might feel vice versa or something, but we're going to have to like ease into it a little bit, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that's really kind of what he's saying here. And he does give some great examples. Let's actually talk about, it's very, very shady, but it's a very colorful story that he tells about the con on the like the retired businessman and like shortening the story, but there's this whole series of things like with the boxer and the lodge and he plays on the guy's greed.
Yes.
But it wouldn't have worked if he hadn't initially given him the idea of the lodge, which he knew he would be interested in just on making money. And then he flipped that to the boxing thing, which is what they were really trying to get to, which is essentially what Lincoln did. Because Lincoln knew that with him and his Illinois men, like we talk today in modern politics about having a ground game and about like working the convention, and like everybody does that now. Lincoln invented that. Seward was off in Europe, and Lincoln was running a ground game with his famous Illinois men. Back then it was all men. There were some very important women in the background, right? But back then, let's be real, it was all men. But those Illinois men were working that convention, and they got just enough traction to not let Seward get it on the first ballot. And then they ended up working it, and everybody was shocked at the end of it. They were like, huh? How did Lincoln get over? Who's this Lincoln guy? Abe what? But he did it by not having a straightforward approach.
And just to highlight, President Lincoln's nickname was Honest Abe, right. and we see the provocative "Don't be honest." So that's not what we're getting at. We believe, right? that business endeavor should be led with honesty and transparency. So again, concealing the intentions, that's one thing, right? Business is a game at times of cat and mouse, isn't it, Chris? And especially the higher up that you go, the more with your competition, you have to find strategic ways to, distinguish yourself, if you will, to separate yourself. Why do people want to work with you, with me, versus somebody else who may be offering a similar, same product and service? So that's a great highlight there.
So, it raises the question, like, if Seward had gotten the nomination, would we have had the Civil War? Would he have just rolled over? Would we still have slavery? If Bates had gotten the nomination, and so forth. Michael, you just opened up you look like you have something to say.
I did. A producer pop in, but I was going to let you finish your sentence there.
Yeah, well, I'm good. So yeah, I want to hear it.
I was just going to do a producer pop in and say, the obvious, real world example of this is in poker and not showing your cards at the table. I mean, that's really a very basic principle there that, you're not being duplicitous. There's no reason to let anyone see your cards.
Exactly.
That's losing your advantage. That is your competitive advantage, is to not let people know exactly what your intentions are, exactly what you're holding in your hand.
Right. And maybe even try and make them think that you've got a bad hand when you've got a good hand, or vice versa. Right. So that is playing the game. And it doesn't mean that you're not honest.
Correct.
Nothing could be more honest than trying to hold the Union together, protect the Constitution, and end the vile practice of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
But
100%.
You're using these methods to do it.
Hashtag don't show your cards.
That's right.
Part 2, Chris, talks about using smoke screens to disguise the actions. Deception is always the best strategy. And again, with Robert's provocative standpoint, we see what alludes to a lack of honesty and transparency here. But deceptions require a screen of smoke to distract people. And again, I like that. We're not deceiving. We may be distracting, just like Michael referenced with the hand of cards, right? Or you referenced, make people believe we've got something else than what we really have. Distract or divert people's attention for the real purpose. And we won't talk about how mainstream media does that all the time with propaganda. Okay. The bland exterior, like the unreadable poker face, there you go, Michael, is often the perfect smoke screen, hiding your intentions behind the comfortable and familiar. If you lead the sucker, I wanted to make sure I was reading that right. If you lead the sucker down a familiar path, he won't catch on when you lead him into a trap. Ooh.
Super provocative.
Super. Uber.
But if we just tone down the language, you're talking about, it's back to the getting your kid to eat broccoli.
Yes.
There's nothing illicit about it. You're doing something good, but it's what's going to be effective to get your kid to eat more lettuce or end slavery.
Exactly. And here's some imagery for you that kind of ties into that discretion or diversion. The image, a sheepskin. A sheep never marauds. A sheep never deceives. A sheep is magnificently dumb and docile. With a sheepskin on his back, a fox can pass right into the chicken coop.
The chicken coop.
The chicken coop.
That seems like a mixed metaphor.
It does, but that's what it says.
That's okay.
The fox wants the chickens, dudes. Okay, that's just the bottom line. But yes, disguise. Discretion.
I got to make a bad joke about because it wants the chicken, because if you eat lamb, you get wool in your teeth.
Yeah, there you go. Do I laugh out loud now or later?
Later, since it wasn't actually funny. Yep.
But
it's kind of an obvious point, and what are the other? I don't know what I wanted to go back to. Is you were talking about the poker face. Michael was talking about the poker face and keeping your cards close. Some other famous people. We've been talking about Lincoln. Let's also talk about Teddy Roosevelt. Let's talk about Nathaniel Rothschild. Two very, very important figures in history who need no introduction, who famously had poker faces. Nobody could ever tell what they were thinking. They always had this inscrutable smile.
Very stoic.
Really, yeah. They had a poker face, right? And so there's really something to that on every level of dealing with things, from family matters to dating, to business, to politics. It's reality. What's one of the other examples he gives about the countess who was trying to help the handsome but ignorant young lover, and he was following her advice, and it was going pretty well. But then he blundered it and was like, "Oh, baby, I love you so much." And she was like, "What?" Because he messed up the game.
Couldn't control the emotions, right?
Right.
Emotions got the best of us. And I think that's obviously when you're playing the game of politics, business, whatever it is, you have to learn to control your emotions, right? Because people are going to try to provoke a reaction out of you, or they're going to try to provoke a response. So as Robert kind of closes this law up, he says, no smokescreen, red herring, false sincerity, or any other diversionary device will succeed in concealing your intentions if you already have an established reputation for deception.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hope you guys don't have that reputation, and that is not the path we want to go down. Quite the office, right?
Right.
Quite the office. Quite the opposite.
Opposite. Yeah, I'm wary to get into too much politics here, but I can't help but think that the most recent former president is a good example of that reputation, because I think he's been one of the, let's just talk about before Trump was the president. He was, you could debate how actually successful he was, but he had the appearance of success, right? Before he was president. And he did that famously through a lot of kind of what we're talking about here. And I'm not holding him up. I'm actually being critical here. I'm not necessarily holding him up but by now, even though that worked for him for a long time, isn't that a perfect example of what you're talking about? That kind of worked for him for a long time. And maybe it would have worked for him forever if he hadn't gone into public office. But by now, I think at least for a lot of us, if certainly not everybody, but for a lot of us, he is a perfect example of that reputation.
Yep. And again, guys, our reasoning behind discussing the provocative and controversial 48 laws of power is to provoke a deeper thought in you, create some maybe different perspectives and idealism, and you figure out, you sift the wheat from the tares. You kind of separate what would be beneficial for you to use. But again, I think, Chris, that this is the kind of book that everybody should take some time diving into, just to get a better gauge on understanding the human psyche, human nature, and psychology. So again, guys, your legacy matters, but it's up to you to make sure it endures. So make sure every day you're taking steps to do that. And we look forward to seeing you on the next Business Book Club podcast. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please be sure you subscribe on YouTube or the podcast on anchor.fm, and follow me on social media at Metalpreneur. If you're ready to talk about building your own bank, use the QR code or go to rebrand.ly/buildabank. Be sure and join us for the next broadcast, as together we learn to live and operate just like the banks do.